Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Avalon, episode 21. Today's episode, we're building something that I've been looking forward to building for a very long time now. I've been talking about it in some of the previous episodes, in the transportation episode, in some of the older episodes where we're building some of the highways and kind of planning out the city. But we've been talking about building an interchange that links all of these different highways together. It connects to the downtown area, it connects to the future rail hub, and really just kind of acts as a focal point, a center point in the city. And so finally, after 9 months of strenuous development and working on this interchange, I'm just kidding, it hasn't been 9 months. I've worked on this for the past few weeks, so it was a lot more content than what I would usually put into a single episode, but it also didn't make a lot of sense to kind of break this down into anything more than one single cohesive episode, so that's kind of where I took this. But before we get into the actual episode itself, I do want to talk at least a little bit about kind of where I've been and what I've been up to and why I haven't uploaded a video in so long. So for those of you that don't know, I've been doing YouTube for about 7 years now. I started halfway through high school and then I did it all through college. It was actually my main source of income in college, so that's how, I paid for a living, for food, for everything else. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was like a very enjoyable job to have, but it was also kind of the secondary component, first being school. So I was always focused on getting education and progressing my career and kind of figuring out where I was going to go from there. So, fast forward to my 4th year in college, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I'm getting ready to graduate college. I got to figure out where I'm going to go from here. What am I going to do? What's my end goal? What's my focus? That's sort of around the time that I decided to take a little bit of a break from YouTube and really focus on that aspect. I spent the last year really thinking about this, trying to push myself towards the career that I wanted to have. And I actually did start working full-time recently, which is awesome. I work as a game developer. That's what I studied for. In college, I studied as a computer science major, and I always wanted to be a game developer. So I spent a bunch of time working on side projects, working on personal projects, sharpening some skills in areas outside of my classes. And I really think that was a large proponent of why I ended up getting the job that I ended up getting. So I feel like it was necessary to take a bit of a break, but it also gave me an opportunity to figure out the things that I wanted to focus on most in life. And it just so happened that I needed to spend some time away from YouTube so that I could take the extra time that I had when I wasn't working on my classes to focus on those things. So now we're here today. I'm still taking a few night classes to finish up my undergrad, but it's really not too bad. It's like 1 or 2 classes for the next 2 semesters. And I'd like to start integrating some of these other components in my life, back in a way that kind of all fits together. Of course, there's YouTube, there's Avalon, and these are things that I really would like to continue doing. In particular, FluxTrans and the YouTube videos that I make on this channel. The whole process of recording to editing to publishing and then getting some feedback from you guys is very, very gratifying, and it's something that I don't want to give up anytime soon. But I also have some other things that I really enjoy doing, and some other projects that I've been working on since I took a break from YouTube. And of course, being a guy who makes YouTube videos, when I started these projects, I started filming them because I wanted to get footage and potentially make videos out of it. A lot of them would be a little more electronics oriented. I recently started a project where I bought an old 1973 Gottlieb pinball machine. They're totally electromechanical, so there's no, digital states stored or anything like that. And I wanted to take some Raspberry Pis and some microcontrollers and turn it into a modernized pinball machine with LEDs and lights and modes and scoring and all that stuff. And it's been a really, really fun project. So I don't want to change FluxTrans. I want this to still be the same kind of channel with the same kind of content. And so I think that would probably belong on a new channel, and that may come in the future, but this is all kind of just a way to bring all these different interests together, tie them all in with the filmmaking aspect that I enjoy so much and the uploading and all those things. So that's sort of the plan going forward. I'd like to start a second channel at some point, and I'm aware that there probably won't be a ton of carryover from the FluxTrans audience to this new channel, and that's totally fine. I totally get that. I wouldn't really expect there to be that much carryover, but I'll still nonetheless tweet about it or maybe even, make some sort of post about it whenever I actually do launch the second channel. And maybe some of you guys who are just interested in the stuff that I like to do outside of City Skylines might be interested and maybe not. But regardless, that's sort of where I'm looking to go from here. Step one, of course, being reboot Avalon, and this will be certainly the primary project going forward. Even if I start making other projects and start working on other channels, I'd like to always be able to come back to this as something where I can just come home and throw on some music and relax and work on the next phase in the project. So I hope that explained a bit about what's been going on and where I've been. I don't like to get too meta on this channel or talk about the channel itself on this channel very often, but I felt like with the amount of time that I took off, it kind of warranted a bit of an explanation. So, hopefully that satisfies those of you who are curious what's been going on. And I think with that, let's get back to the episode. So right off the bat, I want to talk a little bit about the techniques that I used going into building this interchange, because it's really so much bigger than anything else I've ever made before in City Skylines, and it kind of needed to follow a certain set of criteria. Like, for one thing, it needs to connect a lot of different parts of the city. I think that in total it was something like 7 or 8 different points that need to be connected in one single interchange, which is already so much more than I've ever done before. But on top of that, it needs to be very compact, because I don't want, despite the size of this, I don't want it to be too intrusive on the skyline. I want to have buildings that kind of encroach in on either side of the interchange. So when you look at it from the side or from above, you still have this sense of a big cohesive skyline, despite the fact that there's a giant highway interchange like right in the middle of the city. So that's part 2. But then, of course, on top of that, I want it to look nice, and I want it to be functional, and I want it to not have unrealistic levels of steep, road height changes or crazy steep turns or anything along, those lines. So bringing all of those together was definitely a bit of a challenge, but at the same time, it was seriously fun. I mean, it was like everything I love about this game that I got to do all at once, and it really brought back a lot of those memories of working on these older projects like Fluxburg and Rhinestone Island, where we got to spend all this time building these crazy infrastructures and creating these big highways and systems and things. It's really some of the most fun parts of the game to me, so it was very awesome to get to actually do this all at once in a single episode. So you can see, starting out, I started with the lower part of the interchange, and I very deliberately built the beginnings of the interchange about 2 levels into the ground. So I started out by literally lowering the ground by about 2 highway steps, highway step being just, the height of one road where another road could fit underneath it. So I'm about 2 highway steps down into the ground, and I wanted to make sure that a lot of our connections were made at this lower level, because we're going to have to stack this interchange. I mean, it's going to be probably at least 6 or 7 steps high, right? 6 or 7 stack interchange, I guess, is what you could call it, if it's even if it even counts as a stack interchange at this point. That's what I would call it. So, with that in mind, I want to make sure that we're not actually going 6 or 7 steps into the air, from ground level, because that's just crazy. Like, I can't get all these roads to elevate that high without having these super steep, ramps or having to have really long run-up points to get the roads to that height. So I wanted to take advantage of having lots of lowered parts into the ground as well. Now, one of the next big techniques that I used quite a bit while building this interchange, and this is something I get a lot of questions about actually in the comments that I haven't really gotten the chance to address yet, is sometimes I do this thing, I'm going to do it right now, where I drag a road closer, and then I connect it, and then I bring it back, and then I fix it with move it. And what I'm really doing there is I'm bringing the road close enough to the next connection point so that I can draw a single segment that won't break into multiple segments. And I think that the distance for that is about 10 meters or so before it decides to create a second node in the middle of the segment. So I want to create a single segment, and then because the way that I got that first segment to be so close to the connecting segment is with move it, by moving the road over, you can actually undo your movement and it'll keep the connection with the road, and it creates that weird kind of messed up road for a second, but all you have to do is just, bend the segment a bit and it fixes itself. And so then you'll have a slightly longer segment that's actually longer than the game would let you create in, any regular scenario, but you can do this with move it, and you can also do this, with anarchy, but there are ways to create segments that are much longer than what the game allows. And so the thing you have to be careful about is the game uses the nodes as a way to decide if it should be rendering a segment. So if there's nodes that are off screen, it'll stop rendering the segment. So you got to be careful about that. If you make a segment that's too long, then if you zoom in and one of the nodes is off screen, it'll just not render the segment. It'll pop in and out at weird times and it'll look kind of odd. So you don't want to push your luck too much with the length of these segments, but I definitely take advantage of having fewer nodes because it allows you to create much smoother curves. You really want to make sure that you're letting the I guess the bends in the segments do a lot of the work for you. So I just did it again right there, you can see. And instead of having to try to create two different bends that are symmetrical and match with that, with those two nodes, I just delete it and I make one big bend. And the other big benefit of this, and again, as long as you're not, pushing it too far and all of a sudden things aren't rendering in properly, another big benefit of this is you're reducing your node count. So you will actually have more nodes to work with in your city, and you won't hit the node limit nearly as soon. And I'm not really sure if node limit is usually a big issue for some people. I would guess that if you're using a lot of detail, you'll probably hit the prop limit before you hit the node limit, but it's also worth noting that if you're doing things like using different networked props, like the networked fences and things of that nature, you are still using your nodes and your segments, so you are still populating that list, and that will probably cause you to hit that limit much sooner. But you can really use this trick with almost any of the nodes or the segments, and it's kind of an odd thing to think about, but in reality, it's one of the easiest ways to optimize how many nodes and segments you use. And not only that, but it's just, there's so many benefits of doing it this way instead of trying to work around the amount of nodes that the game creates by default when you're building these roads. So here we go, I'm gonna do it again and create that little connection there. So I really do use this trick all the time. And not only that, but I do often as well just draw roads randomly, and then I use the move it tool to actually shape them. I don't really use the road tool to actually create my curves and my roads very often, which I think that's a little more common now. I see a lot of people doing that as well, but move it in general is really just the game changer. Like this is the mod that will allow you to not only create better things, but also optimize the amount of nodes and segments that you use in your cities. So I would say beyond that, maybe some other techniques that I use quite a bit here is creating a lot of my connection points early on. So you'll see I'm working on one right now, and this one I built in a little bit later. This is actually the one that's going to go to the rail hub in the future. So I kind of thought about it midway through. I was like, I should have a dedicated highway that goes straight to the main rail hub, because we're going to have a lot of traffic going in and out from there. And I'd like to make this easily accessible from the city. So this was a kind of an odd case where I added an extra connection afterwards, but I did find that it was very helpful to build at least, a segment in each direction of all the highways in all the places where I wanted to eventually connect them, rather than just start making the interchange and kind of, draw out roads as I go. So I think planning ahead just a little bit can definitely save you lots of time when it comes to creating interchanges like this. And maybe even on the topic of that, another big thing would be always giving yourself more space than you think you need. And I would say I think I probably didn't necessarily adhere to this one in this particular case, because I spent a lot of time later on, once I started adding more connections and I started connecting more of these highways together, just trying to get all these connections to meet with each other in a way where there weren't any roads that were too close together, or too steep of ramps, or too steep of turns. So it is much harder to connect everything together if you don't have enough space to do it. And it's almost always the case that even if you create an area and you're like, this is going to be plenty of space for this interchange, you will probably run out of space, and you'll probably end up in a weird spot where it's like, man, I could almost connect these roads, but it's going to be a little bit too steep, or it's going to be, the angles are going to be a little bit off, and it's just not going to, not going to be up to, I don't know if OSHA, I don't know who, I was going to say not going to be up to OSHA standards, but I think that's more of like a construction safety. I don't even know whose standards you would have to adhere to for a highway. I'm not really sure about that, but it certainly wouldn't be up to code. So So I think it's definitely helpful to start planning stuff out early on. This was actually really interesting. I completely changed the position of this entire highway when I realized that I kind of wanted these to connect at a sooner point. And this was actually a symptom of me not having enough space. So, there you go. I had started building this area and I was like, oh man, we're going to have to really connect a lot of roads in a small area. So I wanted to move stuff back a little bit, give us some more space to work with. And you can see here, this is where we get to the meat of it. This is when, I've already created so many highways, and then I'm just looking at this tiny area with 15 different roads that need to be connected, and things get a little chaotic. So I'm going to jump around a bit in this, by the way. You might have noticed that we kind of hop back and forth between different areas. I tried to cut out parts of this video where I was just spending a whole bunch of time redoing areas over and over again. So some of the really challenging areas, I mostly cut the footage out. I still have all the raw footage, and I kind of considered just uploading like a super long video that's kind of just paced, about at this pace, which is actually much slower time lapse than what I used to do. Then just have some music or something and just, give you the full video of me working on this interchange. I don't know if that would be interesting to some of you. I'm sure some people would like it, but I kind of have a feeling that the vast majority would find it boring because it would be very long. I mean, I think that the total amount of footage that I had for this was something like 25 or 26 hours worth of footage. So even sped up, it's a very large amount of footage. And I can't imagine it being that entertaining, but so I cut some of it out, but I tried to make it at least easy to follow. So hopefully it's not too hard to follow what's going on here as we keep building. This is another kind of nice technique that I've been using lately, is to create these nice gradual rounding kind of exits or circular exits. I'll just select all the nodes, and then I'll add a little bit of height at a time, and then just deselect one node at a time as I go up. Now, of course, in this case, I realized after I did it that I actually needed to go way higher, so it didn't really work out too well. In this case, not a very good example, but it's another good technique for getting some nice exit ramps and then connection points. And you'll see we're getting to a point now where we're building over a lot of highway. It's just inevitable at this point that every single one of these pillars is going to be colliding with a road underneath it. There was just no way to plan this ahead of time. So I kind of accepted that at this moment, and I just kept telling myself, well, it'll be fine. I'll just go back and I'll fix all the pillars later. And let me tell you, that really sucked. that was not a lot of fun. But and actually, I don't even think I put any of that in this video at all, because it was a very painful process. But what I ended up doing actually is just removing all of the vanilla pillars, and then I used Ronix's pillar set to create some custom highway supports and stuff. And that is a really nice set, by the way. That made things so much easier. I mean, I had all these options for, L-shaped supports versus T supports, and it was just so much better to actually connect everything without having pillars running into each other. So, that was kind of nice, but it was a very tedious process, and I'm almost certain that I included 0 of that in the actual video. But you can see we're getting away from the main interchange now, which is nice. We're actually working in what is, I think I called this interchange C. So we had A, B, and C, and they're all part of the same interchange, but they all kind of have a different purpose. So this one's main purpose is to connect the 2 main 6-lane roads that go right into the downtown area to this interchange. And I didn't want to just have a single road that connects to this interchange, because it's going to have a lot of traffic. So what I'm doing instead is I'm having all the on traffic go into a single dedicated 6-lane one-way road, and then all the off traffic go into a different single dedicated 6-lane one-way road. And I did something similar even on the B interchange, where I didn't use a 6-lane road, but I used 2, 4-lane roads or something along those lines. So all of the places where we connect to the city, they actually connect to big ongoing one-way roads. And I'm not sure how many people that watch my videos live in Salt Lake City or have been to Salt Lake City. Probably not many, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it anyway. Salt Lake City has a very interesting highway design where, and I think this is probably common in other places as well, but this is where I got a lot of the inspiration for it from. But what we have is I think it's Highway 15 that runs alongside the city. We have this system where we have a giant one-way road that goes for many, many blocks, and it starts at the highway entrance point. So when you come into the city off the highway, you're immediately thrown into this big one-way street that's very wide. It's got a high capacity, and because of the fact that all the roads are connecting, they're four-way intersections, but the main road is one way, so they can optimize these lights so that you're not spending all this time clogging traffic that's coming into the city. And they do the same thing one block over with a big 6-lane road going in the opposite direction. So it should ideally handle traffic well, but I haven't had a chance to really test it too much. But finally, we're done with the actual interchange, and I didn't really show any pillars like I said I would, but you can see them right now. Actually, I put them in everywhere. But I wanted to include a little bit of the detailing. I didn't include too much, I don't think, again, because this is so much footage that I tried to compile into one episode. I didn't want to have multiple episodes just for one interchange, so that's kind of what we got here. But I wanted to do something similar to what I did back in Arrowhead Junction, if you remember that. But I kind of like the idea of utilizing every little bit of space in this city, especially because, this thing is right in the middle of downtown, so you better believe that every little ounce of space available is going to be used for something. And so I kind of thought that this area underneath the highway should be maybe like temporary storage for maintenance vehicles and maybe some junk kind of piled up, or a bunch of like road construction signage and things like that would be stored down here. So we got this little dirt road that kind of winds down underneath the highway. And then I also wanted to get a little bit of foliage in here, because again, this is a very dense city. We don't have a lot of opportunities to get foliage, so when we can, I think it's kind of nice to have some trees to kind of break up the concrete jungle that is the downtown of Avalon. So that's what's going on here, and really that's pretty much it for this episode. I think I'll do a little bit of light work at the end. We'll add some lights in, and you might be getting some glimpses at some other things. I had to rearrange this episode a little bit because the detailing that went on for this interchange happened after I did some buildings and things around the interchange. It was a little out of order, but I really had to do it this way, and I really wanted to make this episode just on the interchange. So what's going to happen is we're going to come back next episode, and we'll talk about some of the other buildings and things that got built around this interchange, and how we're going to solve the problem of having this gigantic interchange in the middle of our downtown and our skyline. So we'll have to get a little creative with getting these buildings nice and up close and cozy with the different on-ramps and off-ramps, so that it all feels like one big skyline. And it was a lot of fun to do, so you'll get to see that next episode. But in the meantime, this is the interchange build. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching. If you did get all the way this far, then I really appreciate it. I know it's been a little while since the last episode, so I'll be curious to hear what you guys think about this interchange, I guess. It is a little bit unconventional in its size, so I would wonder how many of you think it's like too much, or if some of you think it's really cool. I personally think it's really cool, but I'm sure there's going to be people with some mixed opinions, so I'd be curious to know in the comments down below. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.